X Factor starter and TV personality Rylan is not known for being a political commentator, yet for some reason he was recruited by This Morning to tackle the complex and divisive issue of asylum seekers in the UK. And as you may have guessed, it didn't exactly go well.
I've got to be honest, that is a major worry. Now, taking politics out of this, let's just look at the country, Tim.
Yeah.
This country is built on immigration, legal immigration. You know, a lot of the nurses, the doctors that have saved my mum's life have come over here from other countries, are living a great life. They're paying into this tax system. They're helping this country thrive. I find it absolutely insane that all these people, one, are risking their lives coming across the channel like that they are. But two, when they get here, it does seem, and I think this is why a lot of Labour voters as well are now sitting there going, there's something wrong here. It seems, welcome, come on in. This is the narrative we're being fed. Here's the hotel. Here's the phones. Here's the iPad. Here's the NHS in reception of your hotel. Here's 3 meals a day. Here's a games room in the hotel. Have a lovely time and welcome. And then there's people that have lived here all their lives that are struggling. Yeah. They're homeless. Let's not even discuss our homeless. That people living on the streets, veterans, all of this. Yeah. Now, this isn't me getting on my soapbox because let me be honest, everyone's going to have an opinion about this and you're going to upset someone some which way. I believe that something major needs to be done about this. The money that it's costing us, the amount of people that are in this country that we have no idea who they are, what they've done, what they're capable of, and clearly we see a lot of it in the press at the moment, some of what some are doing, it's not all, what some are doing to people in this country. How can, if I turn up at Heathrow Airport as a British citizen and I've left my passport in Spain, I've got to stand at that airport and won't be let in and got to get this, but if I arrive on a boat in Calais, I get taken to a 4-star hotel.
Now, for what it's worth, I do think that this pretty much sums up the median opinion of the British electorate, which is essentially that legal, regular immigration is fine, but illegal, i.e. irregular immigration, is not. And that it's not affordable to use the public money to support asylum seekers whilst people in the UK are already struggling, because people in this country are struggling with a cost of living crisis. It's absolutely true. The problem, of course, is that what he calls the narrative is fundamentally untrue. I explained on last week's show that the idea that the hotel accommodation is analogous to some kind of hotel accommodation that a paying hotel customer would receive is just not very, very true. And now apparently the government are giving them free iPads and free phones. On the subject of free phones for asylum seekers, fact-checking agency Full Fact said this: asylum seekers do not generally receive a free mobile phone of any sort as part of the general package of asylum support provided by the Home Office. A Home Office spokesperson told Full Fact in February 24 that asylum seekers are not given a mobile phone because it is not considered an essential need. Now, some charities do provide mobile phones for asylum seekers, but of course this is coming from private donations and not, quote, paid by the taxpayer, as the popular narrative would have you understand to be. As for the difference between regular and irregular routes with which people arrive to with the UK, arriving via small boat is because there is no regular route by which they can arrive in the UK to claim asylum, which at time of recording there would need to be, as we do not currently have any processing centre in France or in any other country, even though it was offered to us by France. They need to be on UK land to be able to claim asylum in the first place. The reason why Rylan can't just hop on a boat if he's lost his passport is because, A, he isn't claiming asylum, which is protected by the Refugee Convention, to arrive here by irregular means. Actually, it was really important to understand this, right? If you arrive via irregular means, your status is legal once you've claimed asylum, because that is protected by the Refugee Convention, as has been abundantly made clear. And Rylan, you have an embassy to go to. If you really need to be able to get back through passport control because you've lost your passport, you can go to an embassy, whichever country you're in, because you're from the UK and we have all these relationships. Refugees don't have passports because they're fleeing in haste, because they cannot apply to the authorities to get one, because those are the same authorities, right, to get a visa or a passport, that they're fleeing because they're being persecuted by them, right? What do you think is going to pop down to the Taliban passport office if they're fleeing from Afghanistan, which is the plurality of people arriving via irregular means? And under the Asylum Act of 2004, deliberate destruction of documentation upon arrival is a criminal offence also. So people, if they destroy their documentation before they arrive, they would not be able to actually claim asylum, right? Asylum seekers need a reasonable excuse not to produce documentation to avoid having their claim being rejected. Now, Rylan went on to say this:
There's two sides, isn't there, Joe? So there's two sides to this story. You know, this country has got such a brilliant history, the United Kingdom, of legal immigration, welcoming people into this country, you know, rehabilitating them into a life that they deserve.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest, and that is incredible. But what I don't understand is this massive influx of people coming to this country. It's basically like the government are holding up a postcard across the world going, come on in, we'll pay for everything. The borders are open.
Yep.
Don't worry about the problems we've got going on in our own country, but please come over. And I just don't understand people that are genuinely, legitimately fleeing war-torn countries, you know, persecution. It's awful. And thankfully, we live in a country where that's not happening to us. But you're coming through about 8 safe countries to get to ours. And I don't understand why they're in France or they're there. Why are they not seeking asylum?
Now, the fundamental mistruth here is this pervasive idea that the UK is somehow a soft touch. When this is an inversion of reality, the safe countries that Rylan is referring to, they also provide the basics for living, such as temporary accommodation, food, and healthcare, whilst asylum claims are being heard. Like, this isn't unique to the UK. There have been many attempts to make the UK less appealing for asylum seekers, and that's by both Labour and Tory governments, right? Going back to Blair especially. This includes things such as removing access to work during assessment, which is something that's been part of the discourse for quite a while. Like, they're going out and working illegally for Deliveroo because the amount that we give them isn't very much. It's £9.95 a week if they don't have food given to them in accommodation. And we've done longer settlement paths to give them more restrictions over if they can actually settle here long term once their asylum claim is accepted. And we've introduced more restrictions on how many people can bring family members. That's a group 2 asylum seeker. But the reality is, most people come to the UK for family or language reasons. As Patrick Christie's found out from GB News when he went to Calais to speak to migrants, and he spoke to this guy who was fleeing South Sudan.
So what countries did you come from?
Oh, we crossed a lot of countries when we were coming. From Africa, we crossed like almost 3 countries.
Okay.
Yeah. When we came here to Europe, we entered here. The time we entered here in Europe, we entered with this country called Italy. Yeah.
Okay, so you went to Italy and then you've come through Europe. And for you, you think that England is better than all of those countries to stay?
Yeah, all of them, they are the best.
Okay.
All of them, they are the best.
Right.
They were telling us here, it was the language.
Okay.
Yeah, language only.
Okay.
Both of them, they are good. The only language was only one challenging us.
And the reality is that we actually don't take in that many refugees per capita. And most refugees do stay in the first safe country. It's why Turkey and Lebanon, places very close to conflicts, have refugee populations in the millions rather than in the hundreds of thousands. If you compare our refugee intake per capita to other countries in Europe, we haven't taken in our fair share, really. When we take in fewer per capita than Norway, Sweden, France, Italy, Greece, Germany, Bulgaria, Spain, Belgium, Ireland, Austria, and many others. Now, for what it's worth, I don't blame Rylan. This data is complex, and the public's understanding of the asylum system is not helped by poor media explanation of the facts. But there's deliberate disinformation from the right to try and muddy the waters on this too, right? Like, you can, under the Refugee Convention, claim asylum in whatever country you want. But accidental misinformation is still misinformation, and it's led to him finding some less than reputable bedfellows. Far-right activist Tommy Robinson praised Rylan's comments, describing him as speaking common sense, the usual refrain of those who are asserting without evidence. In response to criticism of his contributions, Rylan posted this on Twitter. You can be pro-immigration and against illegal routes. You can support trans people and have the utmost respect for women. You can be heterosexual and still support gay rights. The list continues. Stop with this putting everyone in a box exercise and maybe have conversations instead of shouting on Twitter. Now, what frustrates me here is there's this false balance at play, right? As if there's just two sides of a competing argument and it's just whatever people's opinions are. But that wasn't fundamentally the reason why people were mad at you, Rylan. It's the disinformation, the misinformation, right? It wasn't deliberate. You weren't saying things that were untrue because you wanted to spread untruths, right? You just weren't aware, because I don't think many people in this country are aware. So much has been put into the public's conscious and the public sphere, and media haven't done their due diligence, in my mind, of accurately explaining what the asylum system is, what it does, what the rules are. The people just fill in the gaps in what they don't know with what they think is happening. Like, oh, the government's just giving these things they wanted. Well, they have a statutory obligation under the Refugee Convention to provide these things. Believe me, these governments know how mad it makes the country. They know how mad it makes the population to see asylum seekers in hotels, especially because of the misinformation. Do you think they would be doing it unless they really, really were forced to? They know it's not popular. It doesn't make sense that somehow the government are doing it because they want to rather than because they have to, or that people are fleeing across the world and then also getting in dangerous things because they are chancing it as an economic migrant, quote unquote, to just have a go at the asylum system and see if they were able to game it. Look, we have a very strict and very comprehensive asylum processing system, biometric checks, and all the different conversations that we have to have with these people to be able to tease out the reality of their claim. It's not a bunch of economic migrants coming here as chancers. And you look at the countries where most people come here via irregular means. When you look at Syria, you look at Iran, Iraq, Sudan, Afghanistan. These are all countries where, especially in Syria and Afghanistan, 99% of claims get accepted because obviously it's the Taliban. It's the civil war that happened in Syria for years and years. It should be common sense, ironically, to understand why these people are fleeing and to be able to give them the safe and legal routes. But again, without this information in the public sphere, people are just going to get the wrong end of the stick. So, Aaron, what does it say about our media that the stuff that Rylan said can be treated in the public domain as common sense?
Reform Rylan. I think you sort of touched upon a really important point, Helena, which is what Rylan is saying. I would not be surprised if he voted Labour in 2017 or even maybe 2019. There will be many Labour voters out there who voted for Labour in 2019. It's very significant, right? Who will be saying what he has said in that clip that you played. Partly because there was just a massive increase in legal migration after COVID, and partly because the small boats issue has, again, that's massively increased quantitatively, but also there's just been much more focus on it in the media for a bunch of reasons. Ownership of X. Nigel Farage has sought to make a big issue out of it so it can enhance his political profile. The arrival of GB News. But also it's really important to say, just fundamentally, the number of boats has shot up. We could talk about why in a minute, but it has shot up. That's just a fact. Nonetheless, the number one way that people come to the UK and claim asylum into the UK remains visa overstays. And people that are doing visa overstays are not generally from countries like Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, etc. But small boats is absolutely what you're saying. If you look at the most common countries that are coming to the UK via small boats, Iran, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Eritrea. These are quite obvious examples of connecting foreign policy and foreign policy failure with displaced people coming to Europe and to Britain. So that's my first point. My second point is, in a way, bear with me here, Helena, he's right. Rylan said something, which is that the British government is holding up a sign saying, please come here. He's right, but for reasons he probably has no idea about and is barely discussed in the media conversation in this country. So when Britain left the European Union, we left something called the Dublin Agreement, which basically means if you apply for asylum in one European Union member state, you can't apply for it elsewhere. Obviously, this includes a massive information sharing and cooperation across all the member states. We left that arrangement. What that meant was we created a massive pull factor for people who were rejected from any country in the European Union, France, Italy, wherever, they could apply to the UK. There was a recent report in the Financial Times last weekend in one camp in France from a very favourable, it was an activist saying this. It was a refugee activist saying this. They were saying that in this one particular camp, about 50% of the people there that were looking to come to the UK, about 50% had already had a claim rejected by an EU member state and a country privy to the Dublin Agreement. And so they were now going to try the UK. I suspect you're not going to hear that from Nigel Farage and Reform anytime soon. So when you're saying about, why do we have all these people trying to come here? That is the number one reason why. You might support them coming here. You might want none of them to be able to settle in the UK. I'm not saying that right now. What I'm saying is our departure from the European Union, our departure from the Dublin Agreement creates the biggest pull factor in terms of small boats. People talk about welfare and the money they get, which, as you've said, is not very much. The average person here seeking asylum is on about £49.20 a week. I think they have a card, they can spend it. It's for food and everything. They're not coming for that. they're coming for a bunch of reasons. You've already said language, family, but also if you've had an asylum application rejected in any of these countries, Britain now operates after leaving the European Union through a wholly different system. Does Rylan know that? I suspect he doesn't. He's making the points he's making on national television in the company of journalists. It's their job, including, I think I saw Camilla Tominey. It's their job to tell him this, to tell the public this, to give this information to the public so they can make sensible, informed decisions when it comes to voting, when it comes to giving their preferences at the ballot box. That's not how the media works in this country. Nobody will tell you what I've just told you. Nobody. If you say the Dublin Agreement, they'll say, oh, well, we were in the Dublin Agreement before. We weren't sending people back. What are you talking about? No, I'm talking about the new pull factor you create once you leave the Dublin Agreement, which is a clear thing. We now have Financial Times in a camp last week in France where the literal refugee activist is saying, not Marine Le Pen, somebody who's supportive of these people seeking asylum in Europe and the UK, saying about 50% of them in that one particular camp had been rejected from elsewhere. Okay? In terms of the amount of money these people are getting, it's about £49.20 a week. You've recently had a spate of scandals where a local authority, I think I saw one in Birmingham, where refugees will get discounts for golf, for martial arts, for leisure centres of like 20 or 30% or whatever. And people go crazy about it. We've had it here where I live on the South Coast. The local authority gives some kind of discounts like this. People go crazy. They go, oh my God, you're giving refugees 20% discount on jiu-jitsu lessons. Why don't I get that? Look, this dude has £49 a week to live on, including food. He's not using discounts for jiu-jitsu lessons, okay? Don't worry. Fear not. He's not down the golf course playing 18 holes because it's discounted. The guy barely has enough money to make ends meet, or the woman. They barely have enough money to make ends meet, okay? This is also a really, really significant point. It's on the Aspen card system. So I think in all, this is a really important glimpse, actually. It's a great story, a really important glimpse of where we are in terms of the debate around asylum and migration in this country. I think Rylan is probably quite close to the median voter. He said something which wasn't particularly informative. He's not a journalist, okay? That's life. He said it in the company of people whose job it is to be informative, and they didn't say anything. And I think actually the public is massively underinformed on this issue. Now, you might say, I don't want any refugees in this country. We shouldn't be accepting a single claim. You're entitled to your point of view. Our job as journalists is to present the facts. They are not coming here for loads of money. They don't get loads of money. We don't have, as you've already highlighted, lots of refugees as a proportion of our overall population. You know, I shared a picture of Malta. My wife is from Malta. She's born here, but her family's from Malta, both parents. And I shared a picture of the paving stones in a part of Malta. And I said, why is it so nice here? And in the UK, it's horrible, right? They should outsource it in Malta. Then they can have, crap everywhere like we do. I immediately get replies saying they don't have refugees. Malta, by population per capita, has about 8 times more refugees than the UK does. Tiny island, a tiny island. I think it's smaller than the Isle of Wight. Population 450,000. Per capita has about 8 times more refugees than we do. And this is what bugs me the most, Helena. For the consistent failures of our political class and our economic system over the last 45 years, we have an increasing number of people now blaming refugees and immigrants. And it's stupid. How can you say there's rubbish on the streets because of refugees, and then I point to another country with per capita 8 times the number of refugees, which has less rubbish on the streets? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Listen to yourselves. So these are 2 separate conversations, but I think this is really important. If you want zero small boats, 0 asylum in this country, you're entitled to your view, but I'm also entitled to tell you there is absolutely no relationship between the number of refugees we're accepting in the state of our streets and fly tipping. There is 0. It's to do with outsourcing. Okay? It's to do with cuts. Otherwise, why is Malta looking so clean? Or Germany or France compared to the UK? And also I'm entitled to tell you that no, they don't get very much money, actually. They don't. You might think £49 is too much. Knock yourself out. But they're not getting hundreds of pounds. They're not getting more money than, the median Brit. They're not living a great quality of life. And I think it's really important to separate these things out. And if somebody can then say, well, look, you know what, Aaron? You're right about the street cleanliness thing, and you're right, they're not getting huge amounts of money. But I still think that's okay. But at least we're having a conversation with the facts at hand. We're having a conversation based in reality. Right now, this country is having a conversation with regards to immigration, both legal and undocumented, completely detached from reality and the facts, completely detached. And I think it's almost at this point like a utopian dream to have a conversation about asylum and immigration, just based on the facts, wherever we end up. Because ultimately, if you're a democratic society, you make your arguments, you try and persuade, but ultimately you have to go with the majority of opinion. Of course you do. But we're not even anywhere near that if we can't have a conversation with the facts at hand, if we can't be empirical. That's the job of the media. And the media, as ever, has failed on this so badly. So badly. That's why we here at Novara Media are trying to build a different kind of media. Because yes, we have our views on things. You know that. I'm honest about being a socialist. So you know that when I say something, there's context there. But also I know that this country is absolutely screwed if we continue down this awful path of having these massive political debates and people are massively uninformed. That doesn't mean, by the way, if you're informed, you agree with me, but it's where we have to start. And this is a perfect example of somebody who's talking about something with real sincerity. And I don't want to blame them for it. I really don't. But it's a testament to how poorly we're doing in the media more broadly, not the our media, in terms of getting the facts out there and basing these conversations. It's terrifying. It's terrifying.